Hello everyone, Phoenix Knight here. Welcome to the channel. As you can see, we've got a new broadcast for you tonight, and it feels weird to not be recording a game video tonight, but we are going to come back with the 1991 season for one last show, but this time we're going to recap the season and talk about everything that happened during the regular season. So, for those of you who aren't familiar with the story, Jester, if you stop by to watch this later, I apologize that this is going to be the umpteenth time you've heard the story, but for anybody who hasn't been following the season, just a quick overview. I did a week of baseball testing back in March to get ready for a season replay, but I got sick in the immediate aftermath of that. So that's why, I did start a season replay, but I put it off the channel rather than starting it on the channel. But I was planning to put the World Series on the channel anyway, but I ended up instead putting the entire playoffs on the channel, which I was initially against the idea, but I decided to go ahead with it to add the video component into testing. But that all went very well, and you guys can go see the playoffs on the channel. So we're going to go ahead and recap everything and look forward a little bit. So let's talk about the regular season first. We're not going to go through the ticker, though. We'll stop there. We're not going to go through the ticker blocks because I actually did run into a little bit of trouble with the ticker blocks. So the way I did the season replay is I divided the regular season into blocks, into basically 5-day long blocks. I played one feature game per 5 days of baseball. I played one feature game, which was in payoff pitch baseball in the case of this season, and then I fast played the rest using fast score baseball. So that's how that season replay worked. Anyway, let's go through our feature games, the ones I actually played in payoff pitch. First up, we took a look at the Boston Red Sox and the Toronto Blue Jays. As we can see in this one, all of the scoring happened in the 8th inning, with Toronto taking this one 3-2. Boston ended up committing 2 errors in the game. So that's how we got to our 3-2 score there. And that was on April 8th. Then on April 13th, we got our first look at the California Angels and the Minnesota Twins. The Twins took a nail-biter 8-7 over the Angels. 13 hits for the Twins and 10 hits for the Angels. That was definitely a nail-biter. California made it interesting in the top of the 9th, but they couldn't get past the Twins. Then on April 18th for Block 3, we actually took our first look at the Chicago Cubs and the Pittsburgh Pirates. File the Pirates away, we'll be coming back to them quite a bit during this recap show. The Pirates won this one on the strength of a 5-run sixth to beat the Cubs by a score of 7-1. The Cubs historically won that one 3-2, so payoff pitch had a mind of its own. Then in another division race, we had a game between the Atlanta Braves and the Los Angeles Dodgers, which the Braves won this one by a final score of 3-1. Another matchup that we had to come back to. I don't think I ever gave out a win in this one. I think probably Jeff Perrette ended up with the win in this one. Looks like Mike Hartley ended up with the loss. And the Braves historically won this one 4-0. That was on April 23rd. Then on April 28th, we got a look at the Milwaukee Brewers and the Baltimore Orioles. The Orioles won this one rather handily by a score of 6-2. This is just going to be like a 10,000-foot lightning run view through the games in the regular season. Then in Block 6, we had our first look at the San Diego Padres and the Montreal Expos. The Expos actually won this one by a score of 2-1. This is actually a pretty good game. We'll also be picking a game of the year out of this. But I don't have a pen with me. I've got writing utensils in here that I can mark a game of the year with. So that's not a huge deal there. We'll probably just use a Sharpie for that. Our next feature game gave us another look at the Toronto Blue Jays, but it also gave us the Texas Rangers. The Blue Jays won this one by a score of 4-2. I mostly wanted to make sure I got a good look at Nolan Ryan for this one. I think Stottlemyre probably would have ended up with the win. Ryan would have ended up with the loss. And Dwayne Ward, I think, would have come out with a save in this one. The Blue Jays historically won that one 4-2, so payoff pitch got that one right. Then on May 13th in Block 8, we had the Philadelphia Phillies taking on the San Francisco Giants, as the Giants won this one by a score of 6-2. This actually wasn't a save situation, so Jose Seguero wouldn't have ended up with a save in this one. John Burkett did pick up the win for the Giants, and Danny Cox ate the loss for the Phillies. I'll grab a quick drink here. Okay. Much better. Then Block 9 gave us our first look at the Seattle Mariners and the New York Yankees. The Yankees won this one in a blowout by the score of 8-2. There was some kind of delay here in this one. I forget what happened. But Rich Monteleone picked up the win for the Yankees, and Gene Harris got the loss for the Mariners in this one. Mariners historically won 4-2, so payoff pitch clearly had a mind of its own in this one. Then Block 10 gave us our first visit to Cincinnati as the Reds hosted the San Francisco Giants, which the Giants won 8-4. Trevor Wilson got the win. Jack Armstrong got the loss in this one. Reds historically won 6-2, so once again, payoff pitch seeming to have a mind of its own in this replay. Block 11 brought us the Detroit Tigers and the Milwaukee Brewers for a feature game. Frank Tanana against Don August. The Brewers won this one by a score of 5-3. Mark Lee got the win for the Brewers. Jeff Kaiser ended up with the loss for the Tigers. The Brewers historically won a blowout in this one, 15-2, but the Tigers had other ideas about the blowout. They kept that one close. Block 12 on June 2nd gave us our first look at the Mets and the Cardinals, the New York Mets and the St. Louis Cardinals. The Cardinals won this one 7-3. Behind Bob Tewksbury and Ron on a win for the Cardinals, and Ron Darling took the loss for the Mets. Cardinals historically won 3-1. Block 13 brought out the Kansas City Royals and the Chicago White Sox. The Royals won this one by a score of 5-3, and the White Sox historically won 2-0. Kevin Appier ended up with the win, Charlie Hoff with the loss, and Jeff Montgomery came away with the save in this one. Then Block 14 gave us our first look at the Houston Astros as they were hosting the Philadelphia Phillies. The Phillies won this one 2-0 on the replay. Tommy Green got a complete game win, and Jim DeShays ate the loss. The Astros historically won this one 3-2. Block 15 brought the Pittsburgh Pirates out again as they played the San Diego Padres. The Padres won this one by a score of 4-3 on June 17th. Pat Clements ended up with the win for the Padres, and Doug Drabick would have ended up with the loss for the Pirates. Pirates historically won this one 3-2, so while they got their historical run count, they didn't get the historical win out of this one. Block 16 brought us the Oakland Athletics and the Boston Red Sox on June 22nd, 1991. Dennis Lamp ended up with the win in a 4-3 outing for the Red Sox. Gene Nelson took the loss for the A's in this one. Then Block 17 on June 27th, 1991, brought the Cleveland Indians in to host the Baltimore Orioles. 5-4 was the score in a victory for Cleveland, as the Orioles historically won 7-2. I think Jeff Mutis would have ended up with the win for the Indians, and Bob Malacky would have taken the loss for the Orioles. Steve Olin would have ended up with the save in this one. I never assigned winning and losing pitchers. Then for Block 18, the Cincinnati Reds took on the Atlanta Braves on July 2nd, 91. The Braves won this one by a score of 4-2. Charlie Lieberman would have ended up with a win in this one. Actually, hold on. Did I get this backwards? I think I got this one backwards, where the Reds should have won this one. Apparently, I can't do math. Looks like Jack Armstrong got the win. Charlie Lieberman ended up with the loss, and Rob Dibble had the save. So, whoops. Wrong team won that one. The right team definitely won for Block 19 on July 7th, 1991, though, as the Seattle Mariners blew away the Toronto Blue Jays by a score of 11-2. The Blue Jays historically won this one 5-2. So, payoff pitch made a mess of the historical score for this one. Eric Hansen got the win for the Mariners, and Juan Guzman took the loss for the Blue Jays. I think Block 20 featured our first look at Three Rivers Stadium for the Pittsburgh Pirates, as they hosted the Houston Astros and blew the Stros out by a final score of 7-1. Randy Tomlin ended up with the win, and Jimmy Jones ended up with the loss for the Astros. And of course, you may not have seen the All-Star game. On my replays, I'm not going to play the All-Star game because I just found that to be too much of a pain in the neck. Anywho, July 20th was our next block. It is not wanting to focus here. I don't know what is going on with this webcam. I'm going to have to play around with the focus a little bit. But we had the Dodgers playing the Mets in this one. The Mets won this one by a score of 5-3. Looks like Wally Whitehurst would have taken the win, Oral Hershiser would have ended up with the loss, and John Franco would have ended up with the save. The Dodgers historically won an 11-7 blowout, so payoff pitch, once again making a mess of that one. Block 22 brought the Minnesota Twins against the Detroit Tigers. The Twins won this one by a score of 10-5. Scott Erickson ended up with the win. Scott Aldred would have ended up with the loss in this one. The Twins historically won this one 9-3. So payoff pitch was decently accurate in this replay. And July 30th for block 23 brought us the San Francisco Giants hosting the Montreal Expos, which the Giants won 5-2. Looks like Trevor Wilson would have ended up with the win, and Ron Darling probably would have ended up with the loss for the Expos. That's how that's going to break out. Then in block 24, we featured the Royals blowing out the Indians by a final score of 13-1. Brett Saberhagen ended up with a complete game win, and by far most strikeouts in the replay of 14 strikeouts. Dave Otto ate a very rough loss for Cleveland. Block 25 brought us the Mets and the Cubs. At Wrigley Field, the Mets won this one by a score of 5-3. David Cohn ended up with the win for the Mets. Greg Maddux took the loss for the Cubs, and John Franco with the save. For block 26, the Texas Rangers went to the Baltimore Orioles. The Rangers won this one by a score of 3-1. Gerald Alexander with the win for the Rangers. Mike Mussina took the loss for the Orioles, and Jeff Russell with the save for the Rangers. Block 27 on August 19th, 91, featured the Yankees against the Royals. The Yankees won this one 8-7. I actually had a bit of an oopsie in this one because I thought we needed extras, but it turns out we didn't. And this one ended up being a mess. The Yankees won this one historically by a score of 6-2. I forget who the winning pitchers were because I didn't remember to assign them there. Block 28 on August 24th brought us the Boston Red Sox and the California Angels. The Red Sox won this one by a score of 6-1. Kevin Morton with the win for the Red Sox. Kirk McCaskill with the loss for the Angels. Then block 29 featured the Indians against the White Sox. The Indians won this one by a final score of 8-4. I think Eric Bell would have picked up the win for the Indians, and Don Paul would have ate the loss for the White Sox. And the White Sox historically won this one 7-2. As for block 30, September 3rd brought us into the pennant race as we had the Cardinals visiting the Dodgers. The Dodgers won this one by a score of 4-1. Mike Morgan picking up the win for the Dodgers. Omar Olivares picked up the loss for the Cardinals, and Jim Howell with the save. Then block 31, which is the game I'm picking for Game of the Year, featured the Los Angeles Dodgers and the Pittsburgh Pirates. And at the time I featured this one on Facebook, I think I even mentioned that this was a game that was going to have a lot to do with which team had home field advantage for at least the National League playoffs, if not overall. But you can see a staple up. You might be able to see a staple here in the upper left corner. That's because this game actually ended up going 15 innings, as the Dodgers ended up winning this one by a final score of 5-4. I think Steve Wilson ended up with the win for John Wetland, it looks like I gave the win to for the Dodgers. Vicente Palacios picked up the loss for the Pirates. Now, you may have noticed me talking a little bit about what I call the fast score house rule in the replay during the playoffs. Basically, what the fast score house rule was if a game went into 12 innings and was still tied, the way I decided it after that was I would have a game, I would basically go to a clutch roll and fast score, and this game ended up being the reason why I introduced that house rule. Because I didn't want to be going 12 innings. I didn't want to be going that many innings on a weeknight. Let me take a drink here before I continue on with that thought. In introducing that fast score house rule, though, I did carve out 2 exceptions for that house rule. I carved out a weekend exception and an elimination game exception. Basically, the weekend game, I reasoned that I've got more time to go, so I probably don't need fast score for that. The elimination game exception, I reasoned that I didn't want a team's fate in the playoffs to come down to a clutch roll and fast score. So I carved out an exception game, or an elimination game exception in that house rule as well. You probably heard me say a few times that such and such team has to land the death blow themselves, and the other team has to evade it themselves. That's what I mean by that. That's the elimination game exception to the house fast score rule. Then in Block 32's feature game on September 13th, we had the Athletics and the Blue Jays, as Toronto won that one by a score of 5-4. Juan Guzman picked up the win, and Dave Stewart picked up the loss for the Athletics. And the Blue Jays historically won 7-6, so I am going to mark off the Dodgers and the Pirates as game of the year. The Dodgers historically won that one by a final score of 5-1. So the Pirates definitely made that one very, very interesting. Then Block 33 featured the Royals and the Twins, as the Royals picked up a much-needed 1-0 game on a complete game victory by Luis Aquino pitching a 5-hit shutout. Then Block 34 featured the Yankees and the Brewers, as the Brewers were still at the time fighting for their playoff lives. The Yankees picked up a 5-2 victory and historically won 9-8. Jeff Johnson had the win for the Yankees, Jaime Navarro picked up the loss for the Brewers, and Steve Howe picked up the save for the Yankees, which all but ended the Brewers' playoff chances. As for Blocks 35 and 36, we featured the same 2 teams in 2 very high-stakes games. The Twins were in Toronto for Block 35, which Toronto won by a score of 7-3. Tom Candiotti picked up the win for the Blue Jays, and Jack Morris got the loss for the Twins. Then in Block 36, we featured the same 2 teams, but the locations switched and the stakes were much higher. If Toronto won this game, they would get home field advantage for the AL playoffs by virtue of a better board record. If the Twins picked up the win in this one, the Twins would have had to sweep the series to get the same, but the Blue Jays picked up a 5-0 victory on a 2-hit complete game shutout by Todd Stottlemyre. So as we look at the final standings, we see that by virtue of a better board record, which were the games I was featuring on Facebook, if I do more season replays on the channel, the feature games will be the games that actually make the video, the feature game in the video, essentially. By virtue of a better feature game record, the Blue Jays actually ended up being the 1 seed along with the victory in the AL East. The Detroit Tigers made the playoffs there. Then for the AL West, the Twins were the division champions, with the Oakland Athletics and the Kansas City Royals making the playoffs there. In the NL East, the Pittsburgh Pirates won the division, and the Mets and the Cardinals made the playoffs as well. In the NL West, the Dodgers won the division, and the Braves made the playoffs as well. Now you're seeing the Giants and the Brewers, who would have been the 6 seeds in their respective leagues, but I also introduced a house rule where you have to have a winning record to make the playoffs, or the playoffs will be modified. So that brought us to a playoff series, or to put a playoff round that looked like this. The Royals had to go to Detroit and play the Tigers in the wild card game, and the Cardinals had to go to New York and Shea Stadium to play the Mets in the wild card game. And all of the playoff games I, of course, featured on the channel, so go ahead, go check out the replay. If you want, go check out the playlist of those games on the channel if you want to see those games featured. I'm not going to go through the 10,000-foot view on those, just because I already featured the entire games on the channel. So we can kick that to the side. And of course, the Pittsburgh Pirates, as you might recall, did win the whole did win the whole kit and caboodle in Game 6, as they came out firing against the American League champion Oakland Athletics, outscoring the A's by a score of 40-10 in the last 3 games of the World Series. That was not a close series at all. So we officially can close the book on the 1991 replay. Let me take a drink, and I'll talk about some musings I've been having about replays moving forward on the channel. This is also one of the hesitations I'm having around streaming on the channel, where I can't really necessarily pause the stream if I need to take a break or if I need to take a drink, something like that. But let's go ahead and talk a little bit about replays moving forward. So coming out of my 91 replay, I've definitely learned a lot about setting up these replays in terms of both scheduling and featuring the game, whether it's on the channel or even in the Facebook posts before. Let me play around with these lights a little bit. Maybe I'm overestimating how much light I need. Bring this camera into focus. I'm probably not, because I'm used to lighting up from my Sony a6000 camera. That may be part of the problem I'm having. Anyway, so I definitely got a very good feel for how to schedule these games both on the channel and for Facebook, which that was also the point of the exercise during baseball testing back in March, but it was nice to get the extra confirmation on that. The one thing I didn't get to test on video was the full-length ticker, but I don't see that being a big problem. That should be fairly straightforward. Now, I'll probably have more thoughts over the next few months in terms of these replays during the next few months of the off-season, but here are my initial thoughts moving forward in terms of replays. My initial thought when it comes to replays is I'm going to do 2 replays per year. I'm going to have one starting in January and one starting in July. The replay starting in January, aka the winter season, similar to the winter campaign that I run for Arkham Horror, the card game, will be a season that I pick via what I'm calling executive pick. And the July season, aka the summer season, will be a season that you guys help me pick via selection and reveal shows after the winter season's World Series. The season I pick for the winter season will come off a list that you guys are helping me to populate in my giveaway video for cartographers. Go ahead and go find that on the channel if you want to win a copy of Cartographers. That list will, of course, change as seasons get replayed. Now, scheduling the replays in this way does give you guys a voice in the seasons that get replayed, but it also gives me a way to introduce a form of rotation if we start having too much of either a system or a decade. So after 2 seasons in a row of the same system or decade, that's where I'd use the executive pick on the winter season to introduce the aforementioned rotation. So if we take 91, for example, 91 payoff pitch, if my executive pick was going toward, say, 2001 payoff pitch as an example, then I'd probably use the executive pick if the next season was going to be 2001 payoff pitch, then I'd use the executive pick to introduce a little bit of rotation into that, probably moving to a different system. But the replay would happen in one of 4 systems, and that will depend on which system I own the season in. It'll either be in payoff pitch, inside pitch, season ticket, or APA. Now, the next thought I want to talk about is adding another game night to the channel. In a way, you probably think I already have in terms of the 91 playoffs, but what I'm talking about here is the non-sports gaming, so essentially what Wednesday is now. The thing about this question is I've been considering it with what this coming off season was going to be, being 5.5 months, whereas I need to be considering it with what the off season is actually going to be, which is 2.5 months. And I figure rather than add another full game night to the channel, it probably makes more sense for me to use the month of Saturdays before the next season replay starts, which would be December for the winter season and June for the summer season, to scrape off the rust with with the system of the season I'm going to be playing in. Plus, coming out of this season, I'm going to do a few more baseball videos, but after that, I just want to get some rest and catch up on some pleasure gaming. Now, in terms of the season replays moving forward, I will be able to replay seasons twice, but I'll have a few caveats around that. First, I'm going to change the ticker. I do have both Fast Score Baseball and Ultra Quick Baseball from Downey Games, which you might remember that if you were around when I was doing baseball testing and I was testing both tickers. So the first time a season's played, I'll use Fast Score Baseball as the ticker for that one, but the second time I'll use Ultra Quick Baseball as that ticker. Next, the season will have to wait for at least 2 seasons before it's eligible to be replayed for a second time, and then it'll have to come out in the other way. So let me explain that by using 1991 as an example. Given a slightly longer off-season, which will technically encompass a second season, 1991 will be eligible to be replayed for the summer 2025 season. Since 1991 was also an executive pick, 1991 would have to survive the season selection and reveal shows to be played the second time. And the final caveat around this is that once a season has been replayed twice, I'll never feature it as a replay again. I might feature it as an occasional exhibition game, especially if I need to scrape off some rust, but otherwise, we're not going to feature that same season again. 1991 will count for this purpose, as I did feature the playoffs from the pre-play on the channel, so 91 Fast Score is basically officially done. Since we're going through a slightly longer off-season in this case, our next replay is going to be January 2025, so the winter season, so our first winter season, which will be an executive pick season, and I normally wouldn't decide what season I'm going to be doing until much closer. But for this full season, for this first full replay on the channel, I know what season I'm going to do. And I've heard a couple times that at some point during their replaying career, a replayer should do their birth year as a season. Since I'm very early into my baseball season replay career, and I'm getting ready for another executive pick season, I'm going to use my next executive pick for winter 2025 to cross my birth year off the list. With that in mind, the next replay season is actually going to be 1985, and I own 1985 in Inside Pitch. Based on everything I've been talking about here, we're going to start the 1985 season on January 1st. Since that falls on a Wednesday, and under normal circumstances, I wouldn't feature a season block on a Wednesday. But that is also the last day of my year-end PTO, so we're going to make an exception and feature opening day on a Wednesday. This will also give us the full ticker test with Fast Score so I can get the feel for how long the full block video will be. But we'll settle into a somewhat normal schedule after that. I'll know a little more about what the normal schedule is going to be as we get closer. But I may have extra block days depending on having off days and holidays. I don't see myself doing multiple blocks in a day. So say on a Saturday, you probably won't see multiple blocks during the regular season. During the playoffs, however, I almost certainly would do multiple game videos or streams in a day, especially with the extended playoffs and there being so many games to go through. So you'll probably see that. You'll probably see multiple game either blocks or videos during the playoffs. But that'll do it for this minor season recap, and we can officially close the book on 1991 Fast Score. So busy weekend coming up on the channel. Saturday Mystical Munchies will continue out of the Star Wars Galaxy's Edge Black Spire Outpost cookbook with the entree, Fried Andorian Tip-Yip. Sunday we're playing Space Corp 2025 to 2300 AD from GMT. And Wednesday next week, we're playing Terraforming Mars, the dice game. Thank you for watching the video. Please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Be sure to turn on notifications so you get my content. Be well, stay safe, take care of yourselves and your loved ones, and I'll be back with more videos in the future. Until then, take care, everyone.